BAF 811 Corporate Finance Study Session 1 Investment Appraisal. The expected duration of this study session is 1 week. Introduction. Business organizations, individuals, and households often employ funds not immediately needed in the conduct of regular operations profitably without actually engaging or being involved in the management of such funds in the form of trade, production, or the provision of services. Such investments could be in the form of financial assets such as equity securities, debt securities, or real assets such as land and building. Organizations, both corporate and non-corporate bodies, in the course of their business operations, apply all or some of their resources in acquiring assets to be held for capital appreciation, income generation, or other purposes such as securing competitive advantages. In some organizations, their primary business is making investments here and there. The investment principle posits that firms should invest in assets only when the return expected from such assets is greater than a minimum acceptable return called the hurdle rate. Therefore, succinctly put, investment can be defined as assets acquisition for the purposes of capital appreciation and income generation. As we proceed in this session, you will learn about types of investments, forms of investment analysis, and selection of investment under certainty. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this unit, you will be able to examine the classes of investment, appreciate capital asset investment, appraisal techniques, and discuss evaluation and selection of investments. Classification of investments. Investments are usually classified as short-term investments and long-term investments. Short-term investments are investments held temporarily in place of cash, which can be converted into cash when current financing needs make such conversion desirable, and intended to be held for not more than 1 year. Short-term investments may be in ordinary shares, preference shares, bonds, treasury bills, commercial papers, bankers' acceptances, finished goods and services, etc., once they are readily releasable, and the intention of the investor is to hold such an investment for not more than 1 year. Long-term investment exists where the investor decides to employ funds over a long period of time to earn income. Long-term investments may include debt and equity, security, and investment properties. Investment properties represent an enterprise's interest in land and buildings held primarily for their investment potentials, that is, income generation and capital appreciation, and not occupied substantially for use by the enterprise itself in its operations or a member of its group of companies. In Nigeria, a property is deemed to qualify as an investment property if not more than 50% of the lettable space is occupied by the owner or another enterprise in the group. A property is deemed to be substantially occupied if the owner or another enterprise in the same group occupies more than 50% of the lettable space. Investment can also be classified as expansion of existing business, undertaking of new business, replacement and modernization of a business, mutually exclusive investments, independent investments, and contingent investments. Expansion of existing business may take the form of adding capacity to the existing product lines in order to increase the ability of earnings for the organizations. Undertaking of a new business may come in the form of acquisition of existing businesses or nursing a business from scratch. Replacement and modernization investment is required when there is need to change outdated and obsolete equipment for more economical operations. Mutually exclusive investments have the same objective, and if one is chosen, others will have to be excluded. Independent investments serve different purposes, and depending on their profitability and availability of funds, an organization can undertake all independent investments. When the choice of one investment, undertaking of one or more other investments, the investments are called contingent investments. Capital asset investment appraisal techniques. The techniques can be classified into two categories, namely the traditional or conventional or non-discounted cash flow methods and the discounted cash flow DCF methods. The traditional methods include the following: accounting rate of return ARR, non-discounted payback period NDPBP. The discounted cash flow DCF methods are as follows: discounted payback period DPBP, net present value NPV, internal rate of return IRR, profitability index PI, cost benefit analysis CBA. Evaluation and selection of investments. Accounting rate of return ARR. The ARR can equally be referred to as return on investment ROI or return on capital employed ROCE. It is computed based on the accountant concept of profit calculation. Simply put, ARR is the ratio of profit after depreciation charges to the project cost. It could be computed using the following methods. ARR1 is equal to the total profit divided by the total investment times 100. ARR2 is equal to total profit divided by average investment times 100. ARR3 is equal to the average profit divided by total investment times 100. And ARR4 is equal to the average profit divided by the average investment times 100. The most popular and acceptable formula is ARR is equal to the average annual profit divided by total investment times 100. Decision rule, that is acceptance or rejection criteria. For independent projects or investments, select or accept only all proposals with ARR greater than or equal to the rate set by the management of the enterprise. Reject if ARR is less than that set by management. For mutually exclusive projects or investments, select or accept the proposal with the highest ARR, but the ARR of the proposal so selected must be greater than or equal to that set by management. There are various arguments in favor of each of the definitions given previously. The most important point, however, with any other ratio is that the method selected should be used consistently. Advantages of accounting rate of return. It is simple to calculate and widely understood. It can be obtained from readily available accounting data. It makes use of data generated throughout the project life, and the rates are presented in form of the familiar percentage figure that can be easily understood. Disadvantages of accounting rate of return. It ignores the time value of money. There is no rule for setting the minimum acceptable ARR by management. It suffers definition problem in that it can be calculated in 4 different ways. It uses accounting profit instead of cash profit. Non-discounted payback period, NDPBP. The payback period method measures the length of time it takes a project cash inflow to repay its initial capital outlay. Management usually establishes the firm's maximum payback period target for planned investment projects and then provides operational guidelines such that only investments resulting in payback periods which are less or equal to the policy minus the determined payback period would be accepted. For instance, if the policy minus determined expected payback period is 5 years, then any project with payback period greater than 5 years is deemed to be too risky and hence rejected. It is assumed that the shorter the payback period, the lower the chance of making for a risky project. The payback period can be calculated in 2 different ways depending on the type of investment cash flow. 1. Annual constant cash flow, ACCF. If the project annual cash flow is constant, the PBP is calculated using the formula method. That is, PBP is equal to initial capital outlay, ICO, divided by the annual constant cash flow, ACCF. 2. Annual irregular cash flow, AICF. If the project annual cash flow is irregular, the PBP is calculated using the recouping or sequential checkoff method. The process is continued until ICO is written off completely. The year in which it is written off represents the payback period. Decision rule. Independent projects. Accept if the project has a PBP that is equal to or less than that set by management. Reject if the project has a PBP that is higher than that set by management. Mutually exclusive project. Select the project with the least PBP, but ensure that the project selected has a PBP that is equal to or less than that set by management. Advantages of payback period PBP method. It is simple to calculate and understand. It uses cash profit, which is superior to accounting profit. It serves as a simple initial screening process for a new project. Emphasis is on liquidity, because the lower the PBP, the more liquid the company becomes. It is useful in risk analysis. Disadvantages of payback period method. Unless the discounted cash flow DCF is used, it ignores the time value of money. There is no rule for setting the maximum acceptable payback period by the management. It does not recognize cash flow after the payback period. Discounted payback period DPBP. To obviate the demerit of non-recognition of time value of money by the non-discounted payback period, a discounted payback period is instituted. The DBPB means that the given cash flows should be discounted with a discount rate to place each on its present value before the process of sequential checkoff starts. Just ascertain the cost of capital, that is, the interest rate on funds used to finance the investment. With the cost of capital and the expected life of the project, find the interest factors using the calculator or PVIF table. Multiply the interest factors and the cash flows of the corresponding years to get the respective present values of the annual cash flows. The format can be found in your online course study manual. See question 1 in your online course study manual and its solution. Net present value, NPV. This technique recognizes that Naira amounts arising at different time periods will not command the same value. It is one of the DCF techniques which takes into account the time value for money. The NPV obtained indicates the amount by which shareholders' funds will be increased should the project be undertaken. The procedure for obtaining the NPV of an investment is as follows. You ascertain the expected initial cost of the investment, that is the ICO. You ascertain the expected life of the investment, that is value of N. Ascertain the annual net cash flows from the investment. Ascertain the cost of capital, that is the interest rate on funds used to finance the investment. With the cost of capital and the expected life of the project, find the interest factors using the calculator or PVIF table. Multiply the interest factors and the cash flows of the corresponding years to get the respective present values of the annual cash flows. Sum up the present values of the yearly cash flows to get the project's total present value. From the total present value, subtract the initial cost of the project. The figure you obtain is the NPV. Mathematically, NPV is obtained by the equation in your course study manual, where NPV is equal to net present value, N is the project terminal year or period, T is the time period, that is 1, 2, 3 up to N, CF, T, is the cash flow for periods 1, 2, 3 up to N, R is the cost of the fund, and ICO is the initial capital outlay. Decision rule. Independent projects. For independent projects, accept the project if it has an NPV that is equal to or greater than 0. Reject if NPV is less than 0. For mutually exclusive projects, select the project with the highest positive NPV. Advantages of NPV. It recognizes the time value of money. It gives an absolute measure of profitability which immediately reflects in shareholders' wealth. The discount rate used for its computation is the market discount rate, which is superior to all other rates. NPV can be aggregated for several projects, whereas other techniques cannot be so aggregated. and during the period of inflation, NPV will accommodate changes in interest rate. During the period of capital rationing, the NPV criterion, that is, the discounted profitability index, will always give a correct ranking. Risk can also readily be incorporated with NPV criterion. See examples in your online course study manual. Disadvantages of NPV. Managerial time is wasted in agreeing on the discount rate to be applied, and it involves lengthy calculations. Look at your online course study manual for the format for computation of NPV when cash flow is variable. The format for computation of NPV when cash flow is annuity is also found in your online course study manual. Annuity is the occurrence of constant cash flow over a period of time. Where there is a constant cash flow from year to year, it is quicker to calculate the NPV by using PVIFA. PVIFA can be obtained by adding together the discount factor for PVIF of the individual years involved in the annuity. The total thus obtained is called Cumulative Present Value Interest Factor, or PVIFA. There is a table for these factors, but it could also be obtained using the formula as seen in your online course study manual. See your online course study manual for questions and solutions that provide more example. Present value, PV of perpetuity. The PV of any cash flow from year 1 to perpetuity is equal to the cash flow of year 1 divided by the company's cost of capital. Mathematically, this is given by the equation PV is equal to A over R, where A is cash flow in year 1 and R is discount rate or cost of capital. See question 5 in your online course study manual and its solution for an example. Application of NPV method in credit analysis. By changing the NPV variables to reflect the lending scenarios, the model can be used to analyze the benefits of a loan obtained from a creditor. Recall the formula for NPV. For credit analysis, we define the variables thus: ICO, which is equal to total funds provided by the lenders, which is made up of principal amount plus other costs directly associated with sourcing the fund; CFT, which is future benefits cash flows to be derived from the loan in the period, which include principal repayment, interest payments, and any other revenues arising from the loan net of taxes and other direct expenses, where N is the loan maturity period, i.e. the duration of the loan, and R is the cost of funds attached to the loan. See question 6 in your online course study manual for an example and its solution. Internal rate of return, IRR. The internal rate of return is the rate of earning that equates the present value of the expected future cash flows to the initial cost of the investment. That is, PV of cash flows equal to initial cost of the investment. Mathematically represented, it is shown in your online course study manual. The NPV method of DCF determines whether an investment earns more or less than the minimum required rate of return. Thus, if the NPV is 0, the returns from the project will be exactly the cost of capital used for the discounting. The IRR method of DCF is used to determine the rate of interest at which the NPV is 0. The IRR is therefore the expected earnings rate of an investment. If the IRR of a project exceeds the company's target rate of return from an investment, the project is considered acceptable. The computation of IRR is a trial and error affair, since we require the two extremes of NPV, that is, the negative and positive NPVs, to compute the IRR. The following steps are taken using iterative methods to find the IRR. We take an arbitrary interest rate, but the selected arbitrary interest rate should be close to the prevalent interest rate. Compute the present value of the cash flows from the investment. Compare the initial cost of the investment with the present value so obtained. If the present value is greater than the cost of the investment, select and try a higher rate of interest and repeat steps 2 and 3 again. If the present value is lower than the cost of the investment, select and try a lower rate of interest and repeat the steps again. The interest rate that brings about the equality of present value of net cash flows (NCF) to the cost of investment is the internal rate of return. To cut the long process short, once the positive and negative NPVs are obtained by trial and error methods, the IRR will be obtained by applying the formula stated in your online course study manual. In that formula, A is the rate that produced the NPV, that is capital A. Small a is the value of the positive NPV. B is the value of the negative NPV. D is the difference between the two rates that produce the positive and negative NPVs, irrespective of the signs. If the IRR exceeds the weighted cost of funds, the value of the firm increases. If the IRR is less than the weighted cost of funds taken on the project will cause a decline in the value of the firm. For instance, if the weighted cost of all funds obtained by the firm is 30% and the IRR of a particular project is 30%, that is the same as the cost of the capital, the firm will be able to use the cash flow generated from the project to pay back the funds obtained, including the costs attached to funds. See question 7 for an example and its detailed solution. Session summary. This unit has exposed you to the basic investment appraisal techniques. As a result, you have been able to learn the power of accounting rate of return, payback period, net present value, and internal rates of return in deciding which investment to select and implement. Go ahead and practicalize them in your business endeavors. Congratulations on your successful completion of this study session. Please attempt the self-assessment questions found in your online course study manual.